In Left 4 Dead, you're constantly fighting off hordes of the infected, but have you ever wondered how long these creatures would actually last in the game's universe? In a previous video, I mentioned that the infected would eventually die off from starvation and inactivity, but today we're going to dive deeper into the lore and figure out how long the infected in Left 4 Dead would survive and what causes them to eventually die out. The green flu is the catalyst for all the chaos in Left 4 Dead. This highly infectious virus turns ordinary people into aggressive, mindless infected. But here's the key detail. They're actually still alive. They're not undead like in traditional zombies lore. Instead, they're living humans overtaken by the virus, which drives them to violent and erratic behavior. Because they're still alive, they have the same basic biological needs as any other living creature. That means they need water, oxygen, and a functioning body to keep going. And this is where things get interesting. While the virus might amplify their aggression and give them a temporary burst of energy, it doesn't magically eliminate their need for sustenance. But here's something worth noting. Not all infected are the same. If you've played the game, you might have noticed that some infected seem to take 4 or 5 shots before they go down, while others can be shoved and collapse with barely any effort. This shows two very different sides of the infection. On one hand, some infected are still holding on to their initial burst of aggression, while others seem weakened, as if the infection and their own biology are already starting to take a toll. So, how long can they last? In reality, not very long. Without access to food and water, the infected would start to deteriorate rapidly. Water is crucial for life. It helps regulate body temperature, supports cell function, and keeps organs working. A human can only survive for about 3 days without water, and the infected would be no exception. While it's very likely that the green flu has created some basic rationing technique to prolong the life of those afflicted by it, without some form of magic or otherworldly techniques, it wouldn't be able to create the required sustenance and the outcome would largely remain the same. Think about it, the infected aren't looking for food or water. They're too consumed by the virus and their violent impulses to prioritize basic survival needs. This means dehydration would hit them fast, especially in hotter climates or after periods of intense activity like chasing survivors. As the infected's bodies begin to break down, we also see another factor come into play: decay. The virus doesn't protect them from the effects of dehydration or the breakdown of their tissues. This might explain why even the less physically strong survivors can shove the infected away with relative ease. Their muscles and tissues are already weakening. This is especially apparent with the common infected. While they're aggressive, their bodies are fragile, and they start to lose strength quickly without water or sustenance. Over time, their ability to function diminishes, leaving them slower, weaker, and ultimately unable to move. Even the stronger special infected like the tank are bound by the same biological rules. While their muscle mass might make them more durable in a gunfight, they still need hydration and energy to survive. Without it, their immense strength would only delay the inevitable. Now, let's talk about the environment. In Left 4 Dead, we see the infected surviving in all kinds of harsh conditions: rain, heat, and even cold. But these factors would speed up their decline. Dehydration happens faster in extreme heat, and wet conditions can accelerate decay. The infected's lack of self-preservation instincts only makes this worse. They don't seek shelter or protection, leaving them exposed to the elements. In a realistic scenario, many infected would start dropping off within just a few days due to dehydration, exposure, and exhaustion. So, how long do they actually last? Based on what we know about the infected, their lifespan would likely be only a few days. The virus may push their bodies to the limit, but it doesn't give them a free pass from biology. Dehydration would hit them hard, followed closely by organ failure and the breakdown of their tissues. Without water, a human's body starts to shut down after just 72 hours. For the infected, we'd see a similar timeline, especially considering how much energy they're burning with constant aggression and movement. Of course, some infected might last longer, depending on their starting condition. A recently infected individual with a healthy body or a high prevalence of body fat, such as a boomer, might last a bit longer, while those already malnourished or exposed to harsh environments would deteriorate significantly faster. And we can't forget injuries. Many infected die simply from the wear and tear of their aggressive lifestyle or something along the lines of sudden onset of hole in the head after a 12-gauge buckshot flies through their cranium. Combine that with dehydration and the average infected doesn't stand a chance for more than a few days. Interestingly, this short lifespan actually works in the survivor's favor. While the infected are dangerous in the moment, their inability to care for themselves means that over time their numbers would naturally dwindle. For survivors, that means outlasting the infected might be the key to survival, and for the military, it might mean that all you have to do is go on vacation for a week and come back to a country with a lot less people in it. This creates a very unique dynamic. The infected are like a tidal wave, terrifying and overwhelming at first, but with patience and perhaps the high ground, their strength fades away. Survivors who can stay mobile, find supplies, and avoid direct conflict stand a good chance of outlasting the infection altogether. It also raises an interesting question. What happens after the infected are gone? If survivors can hold out for just a few days or weeks, they may find themselves in a world almost free of infected. But would the green flu remain dormant, or could it resurface to create new waves of infection? I actually tackled this question in one of my previous videos, which was titled Why You Can't Survive Left 4 Dead's Green Flu. Feel free to check that out. But on another note, in that video, I argued that it would be nearly impossible for survivors to re-emerge due to the inevitable transmission of the green flu. My theory was that scavengers like rats and birds would consume the corpses of infected, inadvertently spreading the virus even further. However, one of you left a comment that completely flipped my perspective, and I have to share it here. The commenter pointed out that while it's possible for scavenging animals to spread the virus, it's actually pretty unlikely. The green flu is highly specialized for humans, especially in how it manipulates our central nervous system. That kind of complexity makes it hard for the virus to jump to other species, especially non-primates, without losing its effectiveness. That said, they also mentioned a scary possibility. Animals could still harbor the virus in a dormant state after consuming infected bodies. If someone ate one of those animals or even ate another animal that fed on them, the dormant pathogen could reintroduce the green flu to humans, potentially months after the infected had died out. It's a chilling thought that reinforces the idea of the green flu being a species killer for humans unless immunity becomes widespread or a cure is developed. It's definitely a point worth considering as we imagine what survival might look like in this world. So, after diving into all of this, what's my final take on how long the infected would survive in the Left 4 Dead universe? Honestly, I don't think they'd last more than a week. The sheer physical demands of the infection, constant movement, violent outbursts, and their inability to properly hydrate or nourish themselves would burn them out fast. Without food or water, their bodies already in a compromised state would simply shut down. Even if some managed to linger a bit longer due to dormant states or unique conditions, the majority of the infected wouldn't make it past a few days. This idea not only explains why the infected are so frenzied and aggressive, but also gives survivors a potential light at the end of the tunnel, though it's a dim one, given the risks of scavengers and dormant transmission we've discussed. Still, the infected's short lifespan could mean humanity might outlast the outbreak, assuming they can weather the storm in the short term. So, there you have it. The infected in Left 4 Dead may be relentless, but their inability to meet their basic survival needs means they burn out quickly. Their aggression, decay, and exposure to the environment ensure they wouldn't last more than a few days. What do you think? Could the survivors simply wait out the infected, or is the risk of infection too great? Let me know in the comments, and as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more deep dives into the world of Left 4 Dead. I'll see you in the next one.